As promised in the H5 Flow RGB video, today we're going to cover the T120 RGB, and I know it's the same thing as H5, a bit overdue, but regardless of that, I really wanted to take a look at this CPU air cooler and give you some insights from my side as well, if it means anything to you, of course. But regarding that, I was quite surprised when NZXT launched this, because they usually go with AIOs, but regardless, again, it does look quite cool, and it really does fit nicely with F120 addressable RGB fans that come in a triple box or a single. It really doesn't matter. So what's it all about with this cooler? I think this should be somewhere around the Cooler Master H212, something like that, yeah. And because we have 4 heat pipes going from the copper base to the passive heatsink, 1 fan, and some details that you need to know before we go more into tutorial on how to place it on AMD socket, and of course benchmarks. So let's start with specs. It does have a seamless design, really nice, aesthetically pleasing, like every other NZXT product. Then we have cold plate 40 x 35 millimeters, which is copper. Dimensions are 120 x 66 x 159 millimeters. So 159 millimeters is the height. Heatsink is made out of aluminium, 4 copper heat pipes, 2-year warranty. It supports all sockets basically, except for Threadripper. And when we're talking about the fan, we have the F120 RGB, which I already stated. Dimensions 120 x 120 x 26. The RPMs go from 500 to 1800, which is a shame, because then we get to the airflow, which is 13.94, the lowest at 500 RPMs, and the maximum is 50.18 CFM. Air pressure maximum is 2.7 millimeters H2O, and the noise is 27.5 decibels. We have fluid dynamic bearing and 4-pin PWM connection for the power. Lifetime expectancy is 60,000 hours. Now, what I want to say immediately when we're talking about the CFM is that, as I stated in the H5 video, I think it should be higher. I think the whole specs should be higher to give better airflow and better heat dissipation from the passive heatsink, which will result in better thermals. But then again, I'm comparing scores to some AIOs, which couldn't be that relevant in terms of AIOs mostly will perform better than not all air coolers, but definitely better than some. So let's break it down and tell you how to install it. It's quite easy. The accessory box is, I have to admit, the most easiest and not the most organized, but the easiest, because it has very few parts. So what you have to do for the AMD socket is that you have to remove the plastic retention brackets that are already on the motherboard. After that, you have to place 4 plastic standoffs, swap the original retention plates from the cooler, because Intel ones are originally placed on the cooler when the cooler is boxed. You place the AMD ones, you have 1 screw to swap it up, and then you place the cooler on top of course, don't forget the thermal paste, and don't forget to remove the plastic cover from the copper base. Then place the cooler on those plastic standoffs, and just use 4 screws to tie it up to the motherboard and to those plastic standoffs. That's it. That's all that you need to do to place the cooler on it. Of course, do it without the fan, because you have to access those 4 screws on each side. Now, the cool thing about this tower cooler is you can add additional fan on the rear side of the heatsink, which kind of does help a lot. So since we went through the specs and tutorial, let's check those benchmarks out. As you can see right here, I already have the second fan placed on the T120, because I wanted to see the difference in performance and will it perform better. But regardless to that, the initial benchmark was done just with the original stock fan. This fan at the back comes with the H5 here at the rear. So yeah, just to give you a heads up how I did everything, so you know what to expect. So we have AMD Ryzen 5 7600X, and the CPU in AIDA 64 Extreme Edition with a single fan went up to 92 degrees Celsius, while the double fan combination, what I did is, went up to 89. Clock speed on the single fan 5300 megahertz, while with two fans it went up to 5400 megahertz. So as you can see, it does lower the thermals on the processor, and I mean 3 degrees isn't that low, to be honest, just by adding one single fan. I think the one single fan helps to pull the air from the passive heatsink additionally, because this one isn't strong enough. So yeah, Cinebench R23. The results are quite obvious. So what happens here? The thermals with single fan go up from 88 to even reaching 90 degrees. The clock speed from 5225 to 5200, it eventually touches 75 megahertz. And when we're talking about the scores, the lowest point that it reached is 13,879, while we have loads of scores actually almost touching 14,000. Now when we go to the double fan configuration, however you want to call it, from 87 to 89 degrees, and 89 degrees was just the first benchmark, so I'll just remove that part and take into consideration, because everything else was 87 to 88, it didn't even touch 89. The clock speeds, now this is interesting, from 5250 to 5275 megahertz, so you can already see that the clock speed went up. Because of it, this is the result in Cinebench scores. So it started at 13,900, and then it went to 14,000 and a bit above, and it stayed at 14,000 just by going a bit under, but mostly above 14,000. So as you can see, if you have a T120 and you go with additional F120 addressable RGB fans, I would definitely suggest placing another fan here at the rear just to grab that extra performance, because it does really help with the push-pull combination on the passive heatsink on the T120. The performance is there, it's not as I stated at the beginning of the video. I think I might went overboard a bit with mentioning that the performance is there. It just, I was in my head, I had the 240 and 360 AIO and went with that performance, because 14,000 is still solid in Cinebench for the Ryzen 5 7600X if we're talking about the air cooler. But since the fan is 50 CFM, and I know you could grab a 80 CFM fan and grab a bit more performance, more air pressure, this could be really good. And I mean, adding the second fan, as you can see, it really still keeps that slick design. And you don't have to go with RGB because it's not seen. Eventually, if you go with the F120 addressable RGB that has dual ring on both sides, so single ring on each side, it could look cool as well, I won't deny it, but this is quite nice also. So yeah, it could be better with a higher air pressure fan, but regardless of that, it still performs quite nicely, and that's all there is to it. Slick, elegant, fits in the H5 precisely and minimalistic as it should, so yeah. I'll put the links in the description if you decide to check out maybe even this combination with H5 Flow RGB and the T120 RGB, which is the main actor of the show. And finally, if you like the content and you want to see more in the future, as I already repeat myself in each video, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and so you don't miss any future content, click the notification bell so you get notified. Thanks for watching, see you next time guys, bye bye.